So you've just bought yourself a Traxxas Slash from the RC car shop in Salisbury, passionate about RC, which is a Traxxas only retail shop. So once you've got your Slash, you're going to have inside your box a quick start manual, which is going to get you up and running straight away. But we always do suggest, if you go to traxxas.com, find your car in the model showroom, which is quite easy to do. So once you find your car that you've bought, Traxxas Slash, which is this little beauty here. This is the pink one. So once you're here in the Traxxas Slash page, you can also search by model number. So on the side of your box, on the label, where the barcode is, you'll have a little number there. So if you want to make it easier, you can just put the search up here and it'll find your car for you. But once you've got to the car page, this is where you've got all the information: overview, details, features, specs, videos, gallery, what accessories fit, batteries, telemetry, all these informations. Support is the button you want down this left hand side, so hit the support button. And then here you've got your troubleshooting support, product documents and exploded views. So if you do run into troubles or issues that you can't answer quite quickly or clearly with the quick start guide, then this is the great page to end up on. We would all say just come here first and get the manual, which is this one here. They come in English, French, Spanish and German, so grab whichever one suits you. English for me. And then here we have the PDF of the manual. So you can also download that to your machine if you want to, or if you're just looking at it quickly, you can have a read through here. So you get an introduction, some safety precautions, some warnings about fire hazards, etc. This is generally to do with batteries, what to do and what not to do with LiPo or 9H batteries. So keep an eye on that page, that's very important. You get an overview of the tools, supplies and required equipment. So all the tools that have been supplied with your car, bits and pieces, what's required, which is 4 AA batteries effectively for the transmitter. Everything else is there that you need in the box. Anatomy of the Slash, so exploded view there, diagram from above, what's where, quick start setting up. So just a quick checklist of things that you need to make sure are done and ready. Then your introduction, some keywords and their meanings. So that's a good read. You'll learn a lot from these manuals about radio control as a hobby in general. Important radio system precautions. So that's again another really good read there. And the model wiring diagram for the transmitter and receiver, ESC and motor. That tells you exactly where to plug things into the receiver if ever you disconnect them for cleaning the model. That's a really good page. Then you get onto the basics of installing the transmitter batteries, charging the battery pack, how to charge these batteries, you know, what to do first, what the flashing lights mean, what the different colour codes mean, if the light's red or green or flashing green, etc. So that's all very good information. Key tip of information here is use AA batteries, the new alkaline batteries. So basically they're 1.5 volts per cell. You don't want to use the rechargeable ones because they're generally only 1.2 volts. So if you are using rechargeable batteries, make sure they're 1.5 volts. Installation of the battery pack. So this is just generally what to do with the battery, putting that into the car. Tells you about the high current connector, what that is. It's the Traxxas specific connector. Radio system rules. So these are all really well laid out, and the important stuff is quite well highlighted. So always turn your transmitter on first, then plug the batteries together, and then turn on the model. Another little thing that I do with all my models is when I do turn them on while they're lifted off the ground. So if your wheels have been misaligned or been turned while the model's been switched off, when the radio switches back on, it's automatically going to want to bring them wheels back to neutral position. So sometimes on a hard grip surface, if you've got a heavy car especially, if there's grip, so if you're on carpet or anything like that, the wheels are going to automatically jolt back to centre, which can sometimes cost you a servo. So I always turn my cars on just lifted off the ground, so when the wheels do move, if they move, that doesn't cause any issues. The radio system controls, so an overview of what does what here: forwards, reverse, left and right, how to reverse the steering and the throttle, the procedure for those. Using the radio system, so basically how you're expected to use the Traxxas radio system. One key point here, which is again in the diagram, is the antenna for these radio systems is in the front end of the radio. It's not on a thing sticking out the top. So you're pointing this like a gun at your vehicle. So that's how you're going to get the best connection to your model. So it is a directional antenna. So point it wherever the car is, point it to it. That's pretty cool. Then you've got your page, which is just kind of telling you all about the transmitter LED codes. So different, again, solid green will mean something, slow red flashing will mean something, flashing medium red. These all tell you everything what's going on. Setting up the antenna, so for the real new people. There's also how to bind your transmitter to the car. So if for any reason there was an issue with a disconnection from your transmitter to the receiver in the car, you'll straight away be able to rebind it by reading this little section here. Setting up the antenna, that's pretty basic, but there is a little tool in the box, and if you don't read this part of the manual, you probably wouldn't have a clue what it does or what it was actually for. So, but it's for that. Slides down across the top of the antenna tube down onto this nut, so you can turn it to lock it down onto this antenna post here. So that's really cool information to have. Adjusting the electronic speed control. So again, this is a pretty in-depth page actually, but there's various modes on the speed controller. There's a LiPo mode, an IMH mode, and then there's also 3 modes, programs for the car when you're running it. So you've got sport, race, and training mode. That will tell you how to switch between those modes, what you need to do. So that's 2 pages of that. Also tells you the LED codes and protection modes for the speed controller, so you'll know if it's solid green, it's in a certain thing, solid red is a certain issue, fast blinking red, slow blinking red, or fast blinking green. So for example, fast blinking green, the XL5's LED will blink fast green if the speed control is not receiving a signal. Make certain the speed control is properly plugged into the receiver and the transmitter is switched on. Generally that means your receiver isn't binded to the car and it just doesn't know what's going on. I think there's another time it can be, I think it actually flashes green and red. It can be that it just needs a reprogram. So effectively you're telling the speed controller what the endpoints are, what's full throttle, what's full brake. So that if you're ever getting flashing, again refer to this manual, it should tell you what you need to do. Then it comes on to driving your model. Running in wet conditions and precautions you need to take if you're going to run in wet conditions and before running your vehicle in wet conditions. Also information about runtime, how the kind of model works in as far as getting the most out of your battery. So that gives you hints and tips on what to do if you want a longer runtime. Obviously there's going to be compromises. If you want a longer run time, you're not going to have as much speed, etc. Lots of extra precautionary stuff, motor precautions after running your vehicle, after running your vehicle in wet conditions. Additional maintenance, etc. Receiver box maintenance for a watertight seal. So all the information there, removing and installing radio gear, removing the receiver installation. So it's giving you everything. Then these are quite good pages here. Adjusting your model. So adjusting the slipper clutch, motor and gearing. There is a gearing compatibility chart on the next few pages, so that's another important page to look at. Gives you what the factory stock setup is out of the box and what optional gearing is good for certain scenarios. So fast acceleration, short distances, small tracks. Good acceleration, good speed, normal conditions, which is what it's set up as out of the box. And then top speeds, long distances, hard surfaces is another option gearing. Adjusting the gear mesh, that's another good thing to learn out of the box. You need to know how to set your gear mesh. This card does come with a fixed gear mesh on the car, so it's like a little plastic insert which fixes that gear mesh on the stock gearing. When you do want to change the gearing, you won't be able to use that. You have to remove that because you need to set the gear mesh depending on the gears that you've added. So you'll need to be able to move it and set it manually, so you do need to know how to do it. Adjusting the toe in, adjusting the camber, fine tuning the shocks, these are all tuning options, and obviously the manual does go into a bit of detail of what they actually do when you change those. Shock mounting positions, so there's positions that you can move the shocks to on the mounting position, both at the front and the rear, to adjust the drivability of the car. Centering your servo, that's another good one. Every now and then you might need to recenter that if it's slipped on the servo. So yeah, and there is the gearing compatibility chart. So your pinion gear is down the side here, your spur gear is across the top. So the tooth of the pinion gear versus the tooth of the spur gear. Stock setup is the white one because this key is color coded. So the white one here is the stock setup, and then the yellow one is the included optional for faster speeds. And then you've got usable range in green and high speed usage, hard surfaces only in blue. So if you're picking any of these pinion gears that sit on a different colour, you need to make sure you understand what colour here is giving you the usage for that particular gear setup. Maintaining your model, so there's a whole checklist here of what you should be looking out for: wear and tear, looking out for damaged plastics, etc., or general wear, at which point you might need to replace parts or rebuild a shock or clean the motor, etc. So there's all these things: chassis steering, slipper clutch, motor, shocks, suspension, driveline, storage. So again, what to do, and you're going to want to store this. And that's it. So this manual isn't as big as some of the other manuals for some of the other cars, but we're going to slowly go through the most popular cars that we sell, so that the video is here for people to basically do this. What we'll probably do is make some of the more in-depth manuals a bit more detailed in as far as what we've gone through here so far is fairly generic of each model. Apart from the specifics of a car, like some don't have the adjustable slipper clutch, they might have a centre diff or a cush drive or something like that. So we'll go into the details, like those details on each model. So we won't probably go through necessarily the radio gear unless there's another feature of the radio gear on that particular car that's special, like for example the TRX4s where they've got the diff locks and they've got the high-low speed switch. So we'll maybe go into those things on those type cars. But yeah, we won't generally go through all the basic part, like putting your batteries into the transmitter, etc., or the transmitter, how to point it to the car. That's a standard throughout every car. So we'll skip through them pages on the more in-depth cars. We'll get to things like if there's any special elements of the speed controller for a particular car, we'll go through that. We'll go through the physical elements of the car that you need to adjust or need to know that can be adjusted, etc. The gear ratio page, that's always 100% something that needs looking at, making sure you're doing the right things there. Adjusting any element of the car here for setups, etc. We'll go through that. And any cleaning procedures, maintenance schedules. But there's also elements of some cars which will, things like diff oil, shock oil. We will point out what the factory setups are. So 30 weight generally on these slashes. In the sort of beginner range of cars, the Ultra Shocks are generally filled with a 30 weight oil. So just keep an eye on them, make sure they're topped up, make sure they're full regularly, because they will eventually they'll run short on oil. It's just every now and then have a look inside and just fill them up. But yeah, with other cars, what we'll do is we'll go through the specifics. So shocks, what oil they've got in on the front, what oil they've got in on the rear, and also the front diff, the rear diff if it's got one, the centre diff if it's got one. Sometimes the centre diffs aren't oil filled, so it will vary on cars, and same with the rear, might not be oil filled. Sometimes they're filled by grease, just some sort of grease to lubricate gears, bit of lithium. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope these videos are going to be interesting and informative, and maybe help for some quick answers of a lot of questions we get asked when people just asking about the car. But ultimately, I can't stress enough that if you can download these manuals to a laptop, to an iPad, to your phone, it's just really handy as a reference point. Don't necessarily need to read the whole thing as much as I suggest you do. But as a reference point, if you've always got it to hand, if you've got a question for yourself, you can pretty much find out the answer by looking through this. And especially tuning, like get to know your car, get to know what you can tune, get to know what happens when you do change a shock position, for example, how it's set up, what sort of usage it's set up for out of the box. Like for example, shock mounting positions. Big bumps and rough terrain require a softer suspension with the maximum possible suspension travel and ride height. Racing on a prepared track or on-road use requires a lower ride height and firmer, more progressive suspension settings. The more progressive suspension settings help reduce body roll, increase roll stiffness, dive during braking, and anti-squat during acceleration. The suspension of your model has been set up for off-road performance. Position 1 on the front suspension arms and position 2 on the rear suspension arms. If you plan on driving on hard surfaces, the following changes should be made. So this is effectively set up for off-road soft surfaces. You want to drive on-road on hard surfaces, out of the box you kind of need to change these settings. So you wouldn't know this unless you read it. And hopefully you're watching this video and it just kind of points those things out. But effectively for running on a hard surface, so say you're going to go out into the local Tesco's car park, straight away from the box, you're going to want to move the front shocks to the outermost position, position 2, and move the rear shocks to the middle position 3, number 3, and add a 4mm preload spacer to the front shock. So it's even saying what size preload spacer to fit on the front shock, so that's really handy. But it's information like that is really valuable, and it's going to help you get the most out of the car. And yeah, so I hope this video does help. Please, if it does, like it, subscribe to the channel, because there's going to be loads more of these hopefully, if we get a good response from this one, which I appreciate is probably one of the most basic manuals. and it's going to be the same for the Bandit, the Rustler, the Stampede, 2-wheel drive cars. It's going to be the same manual. It's effectively the same car via a slight few differences. So there are going to be little snippets of slight different information in those, but overall they're all the same car. So yeah, thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you at the next one.